In our last episode of Season 1, we changed things up a bit, and instead of having a discussion with a relationship expert, Liz and I have a heart-to-heart discussion with a couple Liz has seen in her private counseling practice. Sam and Ember were on the verge of divorce for several years. They open up about what contributed to the breakdown of their marriage, and then discuss the incremental changes that led to their total turnaround. Their vulnerability and courageous story is truly inspiring as they share the importance of forgiveness, developing a new perspective, and positive habits that have transformed their marriage. Their story shows that a stronger marriage connection is possible, and the work is worth it. We not only hope you enjoy and are inspired by today's episode, but we want to invite you, as our listeners, to join us as a potential guest on the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast in Season 2, which starts in August. We're looking to occasionally bring on couples who have experienced serious challenges but have worked through the challenges to become marriage champions. If that's you, send us an email at marriagecommission@usu.edu. Thanks for listening, and join us in August for Season 2 of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast.
Welcome to Stronger Marriage Connection. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Liz Hale, along with my friend, the esteemed professor, Dr. Dave Schramm. We are dedicating our life's work to bringing you the best we can find in valid marital research, along with a few tips and tools to help you create the marriage of your dreams. Well, there's something special today. It's really a pleasure to introduce to you a couple from my private practice, Sam and Ember. They're willing to no longer be private, but go public and share with you how they miraculously turned their marriage around from miserable to incredible. When I first met Sam and Ember, they were on the verge of divorce. They'd been married a fair amount of time, a couple decades, close to it, I believe, and they had 6 kiddos. They're really an incredible couple. They were on the verge of divorce, but maybe I should preface that to say Ember was on the verge of divorce. What I recall most from our very first session was that Ember hated Sam. While Sam felt that hate for a very long time, he wasn't willing to give up on his marriage. Was their transformation quick? No, but it was remarkable. Welcome to Stronger Marriage Connection, Sam and Ember.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dave.
Such an honor. May we please start at the beginning? You two have been married for how many years now? Set the record straight.
25 years.
Wow, that's incredible. How many of those years would you mark as incredibly happy years?
A year and a half.
A year, isn't that something? Wow. And so how would you identify the other 23-ish years?
I would say a combination of stable, content, and disappointing.
Yeah. You know, as you look back, Sam and Ember, what's the one thing that you wish you had known before getting married? Here you met this great person, and I really still to this day believe you married a really cool individual, both of you. But what was missing in your knowledge bank? What do you wish you had known then that you know now?
For me, I wish I had known how to accept Ember.
Just as is. Right? Just as is. There was nothing wrong with her.
I realized this all these years later that, I was quite taken by Ember in our dating and courtship. I did have some doubts, however, during our dating and courtship, and I allowed those to form a barrier, and I didn't fully accept her. And it came out in ways that were indirect at first, and then ended up poisoning at least my side of the marital relationship to a fair amount.
That is a really good word for it, isn't it? Poisoning or tainting. What about you, Ember? What's the one thing you wish you had known before getting married?
Well, the big one, after having gone through everything that we have, I wish I knew more about my personal sexuality, just what it means to be a woman and what that brings into a marriage. I knew about intimacy, I knew about sex, but there's so much more than that. And so I didn't have expectations going into the marriage. Expectations, they weren't there. And so what you don't know, you don't know. So things kind of just didn't change when they should have changed.
Oh, I get it. I mean, who really teaches us how to do marriage, right? Let alone what sexual intimacy really is. A lot of our families, we're not even talking about it. So that's teaching something, right, to their kids that in this family, we don't talk about it. It's taboo. Ah, it's so painful when it doesn't have to be that way. I know we've talked how you're going to do it differently for your kids, and I'm excited to bring that up a little bit later. What do you think were the main factors that contributed to the breakdown of your marriage? In other words, what role do you think you played, Sam, and what role did you play, Ember?
Maybe I'll start. For me, insensitivity and selfishness were a big part of my side, and also a lack of intimate connection. I really misunderstood sexual intimacy. I just presumed that Ember experienced it like me. I also thought that it was just an act of marriage as opposed to what it really is and what it really has the potential to be and what it has become for us since. I was too critical much of the time, either silently or verbally. I'm quite the driver myself, and that spilled over into my marriage relationship. And, Ember is quite modest and undemanding, as you I'm sure could attest, Liz. And I ended up just taking advantage of that and letting my interests just drive the marriage, either my career or my education or other interests that I had. And I didn't proactively give space for Ember to grow and to find interests and seek what she really wanted. And it was damaging to her.
That's well said. Amber, what about your role as you see it now, looking back?
I agree with Sam that the physical intimacy was a big part of the breakdown. And my part in that was, there was a lot of my part in this. First off, it was insecurities. I came into this marriage knowing that I was in love with Sam more than he was me. And I had known him since I was 16, and my ultimate goal in life was to marry him. So I didn't have any questions if he was the right one, nor did I have any concerns about intimacy. I mean, I wasn't afraid of it. It wasn't, that wasn't an issue. And when we had talked about getting married, we talked about sexual compatibility, and I'm like, we're good, no problems. And before we got home, got off our honeymoon, I realized I am in over my head. And I was so embarrassed because I had let him know, don't worry. And I just had insecurities about where our relationship was. And then it was the humiliation of, if our marriage fails at week 1 because of me, I just didn't know how to deal with those emotions, nor did I have anybody to talk to. So the humiliation mostly just suppressed it. I didn't tell him. I didn't say anything. And so because I wasn't, I couldn't have those conversations. I did not even know how I would talk to him about it. I just feared so much of losing him. So, and growing up, I was never held accountable for making things right. Instead, if things went wrong in my family or other, parts of my life, I would just leave it alone until it felt normal and then come back and act like we're fine. Like, those awkward, owning up to your issues, I just didn't know how to do it. When I'm married to this guy forever, but I'm like, he's not going to know.
So much painful suffering and silence. Oh, breaks my heart. And we don't get away with anything, clearly, right? I don't get away with any thoughts unspoken in my marriage. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's so vulnerable, Ember. Thanks for sharing that, because I think just so many listeners right now can relate and may not know what to say or how to say it or to open up, or should I just sweep it under the rug? A lot of it stems from this fear, this kind of this anxiety, I just want to keep things smooth, but I don't want to, ruffle things at all. And so I can't imagine this just being so incredibly hard on both of you. So Sam, I have to ask, I got to come back to something Liz said earlier. It certainly doesn't feel good to have a spouse, say mean things, and even the hate. I hate you, in those heat of those moment conversations. And so no blaming, Ember, right? Because I think each of us have been there. When we have our heart rates going and we're just angry, we're upset, we're hurt, deeply hurt. But what helped you, I guess? What helped you to not lose faith. They kind of stick with this, even at those times where you are just at each other. What was it?
Well, I almost lost faith several times. I was up and down throughout this, what I call the reset period. I was fearful. I was desperate at times. Although I did believe in healing and rebirth because of experiences that I'd had in my own life. I also knew firsthand the irreversible consequences of divorce, and I resisted it in my family. And I also, I think, just believed ultimately in us. And I believed in marriage as as an act of faith, as it were. I had these really is what pulled me through. I mean, the lessons and the experiences that I'd had, a lot of them were, hard lessons within a pretty unconventional upbringing, were the things that really helped me hang in there when Ember seemed to be, leaning out through most of the marriage. And I mean, I had just, a brief bit of context to wrap up is, I had, as a teenager, been struggled with, drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and then sobriety as a teenager. I had been in juvenile detention and residential rehab for a long period. I had lived in, under various households in various families, including foster ones. I had even adopted a new faith tradition and new set of morals as a young man. And there was a lot of difficulty with all of these experiences, with the displacement and struggle and even abandonment to a meaningful extent. But never in my life have I suffered more or sank lower than I did at times during this reset period.
Mm. Sam, I appreciate that, just that context a little bit, because it gives us a little bit more than just, but some of your background and growing up, and Ember even kind of, and dating and saying, hey, this is the person, and we're gonna work through this, even kind of a young age, because you guys have some years. My wife and I, we dated when we were in high school as well. So you kind of have some of that history as you go through some of that, which really makes you who you are today. So how do you explain how two people can be in the same relationship but experience very different marriages, if that makes sense, right, Sam? Because you're maybe assuming, that things are kind of going on. Ember's not voicing a whole lot. And so it almost seems like you're living, differently. You're experiencing the marriage differently. Does that make sense? What was that like?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense, but we know what you mean.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for me, first of all, I needed a wake-up call. And, June 2021, I found a book that Ember had read and marked thoroughly, asking the question, should I stay or should I go? Surviving a relationship with a narcissist. And if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. And so I needed a wake-up call to really pull me in, to help me start to realize what I was doing. And so that started what for me ended up being maybe the best I can answer your question, Dave, is a series of spiritual transformations, which have enabled me to be in this, in the same relationship, but a completely different relationship in many respects.
As for me, yeah, I'm sorry. My side of this was like, I lived with so much resentment. My insecurities of talking to Sam, or my embarrassments to talk to Sam turned to resentments, because I really didn't believe that he loved me. And I kept feeling like, why would he come to me? Why, I don't know. I didn't know the whys, but then that resentment turned to hate. So we were living very different lives. That's what I couldn't understand. I was like, the hate that I had, like I couldn't even be in the same room as him. 2020 was awful. We're all 6 kids in the house. Sam's in the house. I would just kind of bounce around to hide not only from him, but the kids, and things just got bad then. And then right after 2020 is when this blew up. And the way that how we came back into a different marriage is I had to change. Obviously, I had to change. And that meant I didn't know that I needed to change because it was all his fault. It was his fault. I needed to leave the marriage in order to get rid of the hate that I had. I truly did not believe that our relationship could be any other way because it was this way for 23 years. 23 years of the intimacy we never had the foundation of the intimacy bringing us together. That never happened. I mean, this started right off the honeymoon, and the intimacy problems became more of a frustration. So issues that I had in my life or just with our relationship that had nothing to do with intimacy showed up in intimacy. It just kept piling on. So I hated it. So I had to get away from it. That's why I wanted to leave. And during all of this, well, it's going to come out a little bit more, but the way I needed to change, I didn't even know it was happening to me because Sam was doing all the changing. Do you want to go? Well, I'm kind of mixing things up.
It's okay. We can talk about some of those changes. I love that you both really had a wake-up call. What were some of those small incremental changes you began to make as individuals that helped you start to inch closer and closer to each other?
Maybe I'll start there. So the first thing I did, so I see the book and characteristically, I confront Ember and she says, yeah, I believe this about you and I need therapy and it's time for change.
I need professional help to live with you is what I said.
So I, for whatever reason, especially in hindsight, realized what I was up against right then. And so I cut myself off from family and friends. I'm not necessarily recommending this from everybody, but I cut myself off from family and friends to focus on seeing myself clearly and seeing the situation and be able to focus. I also studied and pondered a lot. Moved down in the basement and studied, literature on character improvement. I studied several books about marriage and what it meant from different angles. I studied female sexuality and physiology. I just read and pondered a lot and wrote out things and tried to put myself into Ember's shoes. And so this took time for me to fully see it, but I did that. I also, when she said I need professional help to live with you, she meant individual counseling, and I immediately thought that was a bad idea. So through a trusted friend, I got a life marriage saving referral to Dr. Liz Hale, and so sitting down with therapy was with some help was also something small.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
Small changes make a big difference. And then Ember, what about you? What were those small changes you were making?
Well, during this time, he was doing all those changes. I was doing nothing. I wasn't doing anything. I was waiting for time to go by so I could leave or for something to change.
That was the big step, though. You were still there. I give you that.
That is true. That was the small thing that I was doing. And I'm a religious person. And so with this, I mean, this is big. I knew a divorce is a big deal. I'm not just like, no divorce. I mean, I grew up believing you don't divorce. And so through this, I mean, I was 23 years just like, I'm done. I'm done. What is a marriage without intimacy? I know that's not what he wants. We were just miserable. So making this step, I prayed. I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. And I felt like I was doing the right thing. But when it came to moving on, I just kept getting wait. And so, counseling with you, I was like, okay. And he said, just do it for 6 months. So 6 months was on the calendar, and that was going to be in December. So that's what I thought I was doing. I'm like, hey, I'll just sit here and wait until December. He's doing all these changes. One thing I did do is I got rid of social media also. I didn't know that he did. And the reason I did that is because I could get lost in that and get so distracted and not even think about any of our issues. And then when we'd come to you and it would be like, jumping into it. And I wasn't prepared for it because I had stuffed it, wonder why I would do that. I hadn't learned anything yet. I would just keep stuffing it. And so my changes didn't come until the 6-month mark to the week. And that was I had to have some big aha moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
what were those? Keep going, Amber. I love where you're going. I remember a little bit about when that was. You were on a trip, right? The two of you had gone on vacation to see a concert in Las Vegas.
yeah, I was not excited for that. Right at the beginning. I mean, this is right at the beginning again when he said, let's do counseling. There was a concert that, he needed to book the trip. So he was asking me, should we do the trip? And I'm like, no. I seriously, no. And he's like, well, we can always cancel it when it gets closer. And I was like, yeah, do it. And in my mind, I'm like, we'll be divorced by then. Didn't even think it was going to, I'm like, no, we'll be done by then. And so the trip comes and it literally is the next week is December. And I didn't want to go. And I remember coming to you talking, I'm like, we're done. I do not want to make our marriage work because making our marriage work means more sex. I don't want that. And you're like, just go have a good time. 2020, you've been locked up. Just go and take off the heavy and just have a good time, So I agreed to go and I packed for getaway. That's, and I told him I'm only going if you get a room with 2 separate beds.
I remember.
Mm-hmm. So he did.
It was a big room.
It was. Oh my gosh. So this is where my aha moment came. We're in this hotel room, 2 separate beds, and the hotel sends us a platter of chocolate covered strawberries, wheeled it into our room, and up between, the guy, he comes in, it's like happy anniversary. And he's like, 2 beds, I'm sure he was thinking this is weird. and it's wedged in between the 2 beds and it says happy anniversary. And I'm like, there's something wrong with this. I was embarrassed but I dug in and ate the strawberries anyway. And that night we're like, it was late and I wasn't really feeling well because of motion sickness and whatnot. So we decided to watch TV. And we hadn't watched a movie together for a long time, maybe even a couple of years. We just didn't sit down and do those things. I was always trying to stay away from him. And the only movie that we landed on was about a couple who they were having marital struggles also. And compared to everything else that we were watching when we'd read the description of the movie, I don't know why we picked this one because it was exactly us. And so we start watching it. And one of the very first scenes is the argument we had on the way to the airport. So we're like, okay, we were
pausing it, we're laughing. It was quite comical.
We were able to watch it like that instead of, be all, because we were trying to have fun. And the characters in the movie, the husband and wife, they had hated each other. They were going, back and forth, but they were coming to a point where the husband, he didn't want to be like that anymore. And he was showing his wife love and she was not taking it. I'm like, dude, she's rude. And I could tell that he loved her. And then I also could see characteristics that Sam had in him. He was reminding me of Sam. And then I was like, am I like her? Like, he was, I could, that reflection was, he is doing that to me and I am not seeing it. And the one line in this movie that was a game changer for us is he said, not everyone gets to experience love on the other side of hate. And it hit me. I mean, I heard that. First of all, it was, wait, love can exist on the other side of hate? I know a whole lot of hate. And that it's dead end, period, right there. You hate and it's done because that's how I felt. I could not get over. I didn't even consider getting over hate. Didn't even want to. Yeah. And so he introduced that thought to me that love can exist on the other side of hate. And I'm like, that's why divorce happens. People get to the hate and that's it. They don't even try to jump it. That was the first time a possibility. And it was there a little bit, it opened up a little bit like, man. And then we went to bed and he's over on his side of the room. And I felt sorry for the way that I had treated him. I was like, what side of hate have I been on? I've been throwing him hate because it was protecting me. I was just hate, and that was a nice little wake up call for me. But there was a possible scenario. So the next morning when I wake up, the thought comes to me is extend an olive branch. And I'm like, what? I know that means peace. Extend peace to Sam. And I was like, he deserves that. I've been mean. And so when we left the hotel, we shut the door and I just grabbed his hand. Now I hadn't touched him in over a year. We were in separate parts of the house, hadn't even touched him. And I just reached for his hand and he didn't miss a beat. He took mine and we were different people. All my hate, Liz, it was just gone from then on because my little step toward him was just believing that there was something on the other side of hate and it was holding his hand.
Sam, what about you? Any other ahas you'd add to this?
At that point I was probably a little ahead. I was, when she did grab my hand, I felt the comfort that, I just felt a lot of comfort. And, the weekend that we shared was unlike anything that I had ever experienced. Because this is probably the third of 3 aha moments, but just chronologically, since you asked it that way, I learned in this experience that, marital intimacy is it's a communion, and it's the union of 2 souls. And I had never experienced anything like that, nor did I actually expect it. And I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't seeking it as a part of personal practice or prayer. I was just trying to be the best person I could be. So I could, I decided earlier in the process that I was going to be a certain kind of a husband, regardless of the situation. And so that was my focus. And so when this happened, spiritual experience that I had with marital intimacy in Las Vegas, I guess ironically given it's Las Vegas, was life-changing for me. But I think I had a couple of ahas that were, a few steps back. One of them was I realized that Ember really wasn't hurting me. And I knew that, but I didn't know that. And since I had been exposed to the 12-step movement and its track record of character change, as a teenager in residential rehab, I had always believed in its precepts and had studied it off and on. And there's this part of the 12-step movement, which is, you just take radical responsibility for yourself. And so I knew that concept that I was responsible for how I responded to the marriage, yet I just felt so alone and abandoned and misrepresented that I was often overwhelmed by it. And one day, as I was, I guess, practicing this radical responsibility, I just had this question come in my mind, and I can't tell, it was in my own voice, whether it was something that came from me or whether it was just sort of plopped there by some outside force that just asked, is she really hurting you? And I just felt it throughout my body that she really isn't. And it took me a little bit to figure it out. So it was sometime later, probably took me a week or 2 to unpack it, to realize that, my loneliness, my sense of abandonment, my feeling misrepresented, my these issues were mine. They were a culmination of small incremental decisions that I had made throughout my life. And some of them even went back, at least as far as I could tell, 2 generations. And they had nothing to do with her. They didn't have anything to do with her. And so that was a big aha moment for me. And another one that was similar in maybe a spiritual import, at least that's how I experienced it and tend to describe it, is just probably about a month or two before this experience in Las Vegas. And I was just trying to focus on being the best husband I could be. Amber was standing there talking, and this embarrasses her a little bit, but it's part of the experience. If I'm being genuine, and she's in her sweats. She hasn't showered probably in a day or so, and we're just talking about something, and it hits me. She is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. And she's beautiful. I mean, look at her. I've always been attracted to her, but this was an experience it was spiritual in import. And it came over me, and I was stunned. And I had a similar one about 3 or 4 days later. And so these were the 2 big aha moments. And then the third one, which I mentioned first in the response. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I just remember, Dave, this couple coming back from Vegas, and I saw them maybe several days later, and they just looked different. They were glowing and happy and smiling and holding hands. It was a transformation unlike any other. It was really something.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I love this journey that you're sharing this and being, so open and vulnerable about it. Let me ask, how did your communication style change over the course of therapy? And were there, I don't know, special techniques or strategies that you found more helpful than another as you come back from this and then you engage in these more sessions with Liz? What was that like?
I'll take this one.
And it had nothing to do with me. Can I just say that? I don't take any responsibility on this. This is really Sam and Ember.
She was the referee because I did, like I said before, I didn't know how to communicate. And that's why I said, I need professional help to live with you, is because I was not willing to have these conversations one-on-one. I needed somebody else. Otherwise, because I just felt like I would go in circles. I'd get confused. What are we talking about? It would just be so frustrating that I knew I needed help to get there. So first of all, it was admitting and deciding that I needed to talk and I needed help. And I actually learned a lot through Sam in this, because I'm a better communicator in writing, and I kept journals. And during this point, to express, so Sam would understand where I had been coming through, Liz recommended that I let him read my journals. And I only wrote about these. I never actually in my normal journals mentioned us. It was more of our kids. I mean, I was happy, and it was just other things. I didn't mention our relationship, except when I changed to digital to a computer and I could lock my journal. Then it was like, let me tell you. And I started just getting things off my chest. And so and I did that because they were locked. Nobody was ever going to see them. I wouldn't have to feel it, And so giving him my journals was a way of communicating. It was like, okay, we're going to need to talk about this. And so he would come and we would sit and talk about them. And what I learned from him is we were going through my journals, he would just sit there. He wouldn't jump in and be like, and I can't do that. Whenever it was his turn, I'd be like, but that's not what I was trying. I would jump in all the time. And when he just sat there and took it, and my journals were not nice, that's where I really let it go. And when I handed him my journals, I felt like it was packed with a punch. I was nervous for him to read it. And all through it, he just sat there, and I felt so much more brave to say what I needed to. And it was healing. It was so healing for my side to just be heard and not be criticized or shot down. And it was several months into that when I caught on to what he was doing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so helpful to me. So I am learning to do that by watching him. And so, I mean, the whole communication thing was new for me.
Wow. That's, so risky almost, right, Ember?
just to put some framing around it. So we were about, I don't know, maybe halfway through our 6-month process, and I was frustrated at the pace and which I guess is characteristic, but I also sensed that Ember was, she was resisting, and we weren't, and I was likening it to my own experience. I just sensed that we weren't getting to the place of healing for her, and I wasn't sure what to do. And Liz had actually mentioned something. She was like, in almost in passing, like I expect I don't believe in long-term therapy, and I expect my couples to come in and to work hard. And I thought about that, and I said, okay, work hard. So, all right, so then let's try this. And so I suggested this to Ember, which meant some, resistance initially. But it was for 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for 45 minutes to ended up being 3.5-hour sessions for 2 straight months. We sat in our bedroom, which was her bedroom at the time. And with over, she had 70 pages of these journals that she had printed off. And we had only gone through a minority proportion in our therapy sessions. Just picked up where we left off. I did homework ahead of time and asked, was curious about this, curious about that, felt maybe this is a place where we should focus. And I just sat and asked and listened and cried. Mm-hmm. And it was traumatic, at least for me, to just sit in that experience for Ember, and to appreciate the what she had gone through.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, just the humility that takes to be able to read something like that. And what comes to mind is how important it is just to understand, to feel understood, Ember, and for him to understand, this is my experience and I'm handing it to you on a platter here, and it's going to break your heart, but I need to be known and to be understood, and for you to be aware of me, and for Sam just to have that humility to say, hey, I'm beginning to understand this, which is just all this hard shell. It just feels like it's starting to crumble away. Let me ask you, what role did forgiveness play in the process of healing your relationship? And how did you learn to let go of these past hurts and resentments?
I'll go. This one was so hard. And it's still a work in progress, because the more I'm learning about myself, I'm learning like, oh my goodness, I gotta ask forgiveness. And what do I do with that? I had to learn to forgive myself. That was hurtful. And how I had to do that is I had to go rewrite history. I had to go back to my journals and really read what happened instead of what I felt happened. And so that took months. And I cried a lot for months. I had to relive things that I was suppressing. And the crying, I cried one day for 12 hours. Every 3 minutes, I was going through something. And it was the journals and all that. And then the next day, I was good. I never cried about it again. I've gone through that several times. I've had to cry and mourn my own lies and my marriage to forgive myself. And now I'm working on asking him for forgiveness. I'm not even there yet. But these processes, because I'm learning more things where I am. And I keep telling him, it's coming. I'm getting there. But stick with me until I ask you to forgive me, because I want to do it right.
Wow. That's powerful. Sam, what about you? Forgiveness. Where does that come in your journey?
Well, I was so mad at myself when I realized about a week and a half, 2 weeks into this process, before we had met with Liz, before I had seen Ember's journals, just seeing all these annotations in this book. And I went through and read it, and I made my own notes. And so every time Ember made a highlight, which was frequent, I would make 1 of 3 highlights. The third one actually probably doesn't matter, but the first one was check. Okay, this is definitely me. And then I put a little square and I said, this I'm confident in, it is not me, but knowing Ember, I could see how she would think that this is me. And as I let these sink in and said, okay, Sam, just fess up, even if, regardless of the marking, realize that this is Ember's experience, and are you committed to killing everything in yourself that is coming across like this? And when I answered that question in the affirmative, I was so upset at myself. I mean, I had been a seriously devoted religious person for 30 years, given my new faith, the faith tradition that I had adopted as a teenager before I had started to date Ember. And I was seriously committed to it. I had lived a new lifestyle. I had committed myself to providing for my family and to becoming a better person. And then there were several issues that she was seeing that were no better than they were when I was a teenager. And I was really, really upset. And I've had to work through this actually forgiveness with myself, which is a big struggle for me. And that's been important, because if I've realized that if I'm not really accepting myself, then I'm not in a position to accept Ember. And as I work through my self-acceptance, then I'm able to also take full responsibility for myself and my own marriage. And when I do that, the forgiveness for Ember it's I don't know if it's like this with everybody, but it's just sort of automatic. It just sort of happens. And I can tell when it does, because then this feeling of love and patience and understanding, it just happens to me with Ember. And so that's, again, one of the ways I can be maybe in a different marriage, but be with the same individual.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. Can I ask you another question? Any new habits? What are the new habits that have made a significant impact on your relationship today? What are you doing differently?
We have a few fun ones that we decided no cell phones in the bedroom. So when we are in our bedroom, it is about us. It's no cell phones.
She decided it's a great idea. It's a great
They're
idea.
downstairs. Whether we're being intimate or not, just no cell phones. They're not allowed in our room. And the other one is we, throughout the day, just send each other a check-in. We send each other a text. Hey, we communicate in Bitmojis. It's rather ridiculous.
Our text thread is one ongoing Bitmoji.
So fun. And then the last one, you can tell quick.
Weekends away. Once a month we do weekends away. That's what works for us. And these take on various forms. Sometimes we revisit these topics and they're more emotional or rebuilding in nature. Sometimes we come in with a pizza and we don't leave for two or 3 days. We just depend. We found that the weekends are meant to serve us, not us serve the weekends. Like certain expectation of what we have to do. But there are a couple things that we do not do, and we're not on our phone. We're not in the television. We simply spend time connecting and being together, and it's helpful.
They're therapy sessions.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're not, but you learn something, they're great.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're intentionally, the name of our podcast, right? Stronger Marriage Connection, that you're intentionally choosing to do things different. And it can be small and little things as well, what it sounds like, but checking in, getaways. I'm a big fan of getaways. So kudos to you on this amazing journey.
Thank you.
What advice do you have for other couples who might be struggling in their marriage, Ember and Sam, maybe similar to where you were? And what do you think are some of those important steps, and where do they even start to rebuild? What's your advice, please?
My thought on that is our weekends away really help with this, because it's a clean slate. If we are not okay when we come on we just sit here and till we figure it out. It ruins the weekend if I have resentments, and that's what I do. I hold resentments. I'm working on not holding resentments. So I'll be holding resentments and I won't even know it until we show up for the weekend and I'm like, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's bugging. And it's not a good experience until we figure that out. And then we have 30 days I have 30 days till the next one. And if something's going on in these other days, if we're not talking about it, I think, okay, I can suppress this, or I can wait and talk about it on our weekend, which that's no fun, or I can deal with it right now. And when we leave, the weekend is awesome. So a clean slate, getting right to it instead of suppressing it, is very healing, and it keeps us on track. It only 30 days instead of 23 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Brilliant. And Sam, would you add?
I'd have just a few maybe short ones. One is get help. If some of these issues can be beyond your coping skills to manage together, doesn't mean that you're weak or that I just think that sometimes you need help. And two, I think getting honest and getting honest can be harder than it seems. Because as Amber had alluded to at least, that, at least I can reinforce it on my side that, I had invested in certain perspectives and lies that were not reality. And those will crowd out any attempt to be honest, and I can be self-deceived. And you may need help with that. And then a three, and this one came to me, as I had mentioned indirectly before, is you can actually decide what kind of spouse you want to be in your marriage. And it really, even though it isn't easy and it may not appear like this, has technically nothing to do with your partner. And making that decision, although it would seem, I would have thought that it would have brought more pain, it actually brought quite a bit of freedom. And I was able to live my values and I could be the person that I wanted to be and that I could be proud of, independent.
Yes.
I think that can happen with anybody.
Be the kind of husband you're most proud of, Sam. That just sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. I get that from Liz.
It just reminds me of some conversations, but that I say that often. If not to the two of you, I say that often to myself and into other marriage therapies. So last question, Sam and Ember, what do you believe is the key to maintaining a stronger marriage connection, please?
We both go. Mine, it's what he was just talking about. It's honesty with myself. If you're hiding things from your spouse, if you're hiding things from yourself, thinking you're keeping things safe, finding your safe way to not do that. And, there's another side. There's another side to problems.
Mine will sound a little philosophical, but for me at least, don't seek what is best for you or even what's best for your spouse, but seek what's best for the marriage and then try to do that.
I like that. Oh, it's just so beautiful. It's just been really an honor to see you both today and to get a review on how things have gone since where we last took off, and I just want to congratulate you. What a night and day difference from where you were to where you are today. And it sounds like you're not done. You're still going to grow and learn and understand some of those blind spots that we all have. I know how much courage that takes, as well as commitment and authenticity and vulnerability. We are all a little better for knowing you and hearing your inspiring story.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're honored.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you.
Thanks to both of you. This just for sharing your incredible journey. And I use that term purposely because it is a journey, as you mentioned, that it hasn't ended, that you continue to learn and grow and strengthen that connection. So I sure appreciate you coming on and being so open about your journey. And I know it will help so many others. So we sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. God bless you all.
Yes. Well, thanks so much. Thanks, listeners, for joining us on another episode of Stronger Marriage Connection. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
And just remember, it's the small and simple changes that create a stronger marriage connection. Bye-bye now.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a few minutes to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. When you hit the like button and leave a comment, your feedback helps us improve the show. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and connect with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and on Facebook at Stronger Marriage. Be sure to share with us what topics you want us to explore or what you loved about today's episode. If you want even more resources to improve your relationship connection, visit our website at strongermarriage.org where you'll find free workshops, webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producers Rex Polanis and Alexis Alcott and the team at Utah State University. And you, our audience, you make this show possible.